were hit in Ukraine.
The BBC's Katie Watson says most of those weapons were intercepted by Ukrainian forces, but the attacks killed at least one person and injured more than a dozen others. Another flight with Atlanta-based Delta runs into some mid-air problems.
As Flight 1893 from Orlando is approaching Austin, part of its wing flap on the Boeing 737 separates from the left wing. According to one passenger, there was a lot of turbulence and the plane was shaking. Then another passenger opens up the window shade and sees a piece of the wing flapping. A Delta spokesperson tells WSB the flight landed safely in Austin and has been taken out of service and is undergoing maintenance. The FAA is investigating, and Delta officials say they are cooperating with that investigation. Michelle Wright, 95.5 WSB.
And Americans are reading far less these days, and it's bad for their health.
A University of Florida study found daily reading for pleasure has dropped 40% over the last 20 years, and could be due to the rise of digital media, less leisure time, and less access to books and libraries.
Michael George reports health experts insist reading for pleasure helps support mental health and creativity, along with empathy and overall lifelong learning. It's 9:03. The Mark Arum Show begins in less than 2 minutes. But first, live team coverage of traffic and weather. And we start the traffic center, triple team traffic. Here's Smiler Mark McKay.
Crash, 5 cars, including a dump truck as well, involved in a crash on 285 near Boulder Crest Road, inner loop, exit 51. All now on the right shoulder. Delays back toward I-20, causing outer loop delays on the flashing lights, leaving I-675. Taking I-20 west into downtown, easing up just a bit now in East Atlanta. The downtown connector is not easing up, though. Still northbound 75-85, loaded up Langford Parkway up to I-20. How about the ride now out of Duluth and Norcross, Ashley Fresca?
Still on and off those brakes the entire way, headed from 316 along 85 south down to Pleasantdale and ramping onto I-285. And Hall County heads up 369. Browns Bridge is shut down with a crash west of Highway 53 at Fincher Drive. You're going to have to use an alternate route there between Cherokee County and Forsyth County and Hall County. Triple team traffic, 95.5 WSB.
I'm WSB meteorologist Christina Upwards. Partly cloudy, hot and humid this afternoon. Scattered pop-up showers and thunderstorms for the ride home. Today's high is 91, lows tonight in the low 70s. Tomorrow, mostly cloudy, not as hot with a high of 84. Scattered rain showers for tomorrow afternoon. That'll continue into Saturday.
72 degrees right now in Palmetto, 72 in Decatur, 73 degrees in Midtown Atlanta at 9:05. More news at 9:30. Breaking news when it happens. I'm Judd Hickenbotham, 95.5 WSB.
Welcome, friends. I was going to say welcome to this beautiful Thursday until I heard Christina's 5-day forecast. It was really nice coming in today, but Chrissy says high of 91, hot, humid, pop-up showers, not so beautiful. We have a beautiful show for you today, though. I can tell you that. 30 minutes from right now, we're going to go live to D.C., get the latest on the Russia-Ukraine story. 1 hour from now, Greg Bluestein from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. A big story that we're following that could impact the race for governor here in Georgia. 2 GOP gubernatorial candidates are fighting over money, and they're in federal court today to talk about that. That court decision could have a big impact on the governor's race here in Georgia. And last but not least, 11:20 a.m. I'm already nervous, Deborah. Legendary director Ron Howard joining us live on the program. Very excited. Thank you, Deborah, for booking. Some know him as Opie.
Yes.
Some just know him as one of the best directors of all time, but he's going to join us live at 11:20. Starting off the show live in New York City, our buddy from ABC News, Peter Haralambous. Peter, good morning, sir. Hope you were doing well.
Mark, thanks for having me. Such a stacked lineup.
It is. Well, you're batting leadoff, and Ron Howard's batting cleanup, so you can put that on your resume. Once again, we are updating the never-ending Jeffrey Epstein file story. Got a decision from a federal judge in New York yesterday. What did the judge decide, and what was this case all about?
Yeah, a somewhat unsurprising decision out of New York yesterday. This judge he's the third federal judge to deny this request to release grand jury testimony out of the Jeffrey Epstein case. And he basically issued a scathing decision that said this was a diversion, that the Department of Justice has the files if they want to release them, and that all things considered, what he has pales in comparison to what the DOJ has in their own vaults. So he's basically putting the onus back on them. It's basically putting to bed this idea that we might see a court-released grand jury testimony, though there's a possibility we might see some documents come out of Congress at this rate.
So this is the third judge that has denied this request from the DOJ. Is this just being appealed? Is that why we're hearing so many federal judges deny this?
No, interestingly, no. And if anything, despite the fact that they've lost every single one of these cases, they've yet to appeal a single one of these decisions. Instead, there was really three grand juries technically that investigated Epstein or Epstein's actions. The first is a grand jury back in Florida that led to his, guilty plea in the 2000s. There was the grand jury that indicted Epstein when he was still alive in New York. And then there was that third and final Epstein grand jury that indicted Ghislaine Maxwell. At that point, Epstein was dead, but they were still looking into his conduct. So the judges who oversaw each of those three cases had to make the individual determination about whether to release the records. And in this case, every single one of those decisions came back the same: no.
All right, so three separate grand juries, three separate judges, all declining to release them. Did they all proffer the same reasons? And if so, what are those reasons that they denied the DOJ request?
Yeah, I think three kind of big considerations play in here. The first is, normally speaking, to release secret grand jury testimony is a pretty high bar, and the Department of Justice failed to make a compelling reason, at least in the eyes of the law, for why to release these records. Second, there's a ton of victims here. We're talking about thousands of victims, according to the Department of Justice. So there was a concern that releasing these records would kind of create a harm to the victims here. And the last was this question of what was the Department of Justice's intent here. The final two judges in both their decisions basically called into question the motivations of the Department of Justice, basically suggesting that this entire effort to release these records was simply a ploy to get the public's attention away from the fact that the Trump administration walked back earlier commitments to release records back in January when the first phase of these files were released.
Now that to me is the line of thinking I was taking, especially since the fact that you mentioned the DOJ has not appealed any of these decisions. Like if they were hard, fast, and adamant that they wanted these grand jury testimonies released, you would think they would have appealed each of these three federal judges' decisions.
Yeah, and I think to a certain degree, when they made this announcement that they were going to try to release these records, I think every prosecutor, every other reporter I spoke to who's familiar with this case viewed it with a deep skepticism. That it seemed pretty apparent from the start that even if these records were released, they wouldn't shed any additional light on the Trump administration, on Jeffrey Epstein's conduct here. And if anything, it seemed to just be a ploy to kind of draw attention away from the Department of Justice's decision not to release these records and put it on these individual judges, shift blame in a way. So all things considered, a somewhat unsurprising outcome. And I think these judges viewed it with a bit of cynicism because there does appear to be kind of conflicting motivation, at least on behalf of the Department of Justice.
Peter Haralambous from ABC News in New York, joining us live on the Mark Arum Show. You mentioned, thousands of victims. That is a gut punch. Have we heard from any of the victims or victims' families when it comes to the grand jury testimonies? Do they want them released?
Yeah, so at this point, we've heard a bit of a response from some of the victims' families, basically saying that they're applauding this decision. These judges recognize the fact that the victims in this case were not really given proper notification that these were going to get released. It was basically done without them knowing. They had the opportunity to write letters to the court, and some of them raised kind of strong concerns about being potentially targeted and also calling to question the political motivation of all of this. There were even some victims' families who basically called out the Trump administration for basically trying to distract from the fact that Trump's name already, we know, appears in the first batch of Epstein documents. The DOJ, when it released the first phase, released flight logs and Jeffrey Epstein's contact book, his infamous Black Book. And Trump's name appears in the flight logs multiple times. He took multiple flights with Jeffrey Epstein in the 1990s. He also appears in the contact book. And there's this internal concern, at least within the Trump administration, that releasing more of these records could exacerbate